coming up on HTV News. As the toll mounts in the foot and mouth crisis, a government minister comes to the West to see the damage for himself. Also, under new management, another company takes on the store that could bring a touch of class to Bristol Centre. And getting ready for the Cambridge-Oxford battle on the Thames. For more, join us for a full roundup in 15 minutes. First, the national stories from ITV with Nicholas Owen.
Government advisor says foot and mouth will be worse than 1967. Russia's embassy in America told 50 diplomats must leave. Police exhumed the body of A6 killer James Hanratty. And why this machine will attempt the strangest journey of all.
From ITN, the ITV Lunchtime News with Nicholas Owen.
Good afternoon, welcome to the programme. Later on, the latest news from your area. First, the government is this lunchtime warning that the foot and mouth crisis is far from over. Ministers admitted it could last well into August, and a top government advisor said this outbreak would be even worse than the one in 1967. It comes as the disease breached yet another border. For the first time, cases have been confirmed in the Republic of Ireland. Philip Ray-Smith has the latest.
In Dumfries, the large-scale incineration of healthy livestock near infected farms has finally got underway. But there may be many more such culls to come. There's been a sharp rise in confirmed cases over recent days, but today the Environment Minister visiting small businesses in the West Country said the outbreak could continue beyond May.
The whole question of burial, the time span from diagnosis to slaughter and from slaughter to burial, all of those issues are being examined.
And Professor Roy Anderson, a scientific advisor to the government, believes the epidemic is now out of control and could last until August. This morning there was a new case of foot and mouth confirmed at this farm in the Netherlands, near to a farm where the disease was discovered yesterday. The scenes of the Dutch disposing of infected animals may be familiar, but the way they are hoping to contain the outbreak is not. Instead of slaughtering animals in the exclusion zones surrounding infected farms, they're vaccinating them. Now there are calls for the same policy to be used here. The government's advertising campaign urging the public to visit unaffected rural areas in a bid to boost tourism got underway today with adverts in many papers. But it's not enough, according to William Hague, who was in Devon to see the effects of the outbreak on local communities.
I think there is a need for greater coordination of the work of government departments. I think one of the problems we've had is conflicting signals being sent out about, the countryside is open or the countryside is closed, when we all know the truth is more complicated than that.
Meanwhile, a sombre Bertie Ahern confirmed the first case of foot and mouth in the Irish Republic.
I'd like to inform the House that the results of 2 of the samples taken from a flock in County Louth have proved positive for foot and mouth disease.
This is the farm where the disease was discovered. With foot and mouth now present in 3 countries outside the UK, it seems fears the disease has spread on a large scale are justified. Philip Ray-Smith, ITN.
Well, now to our political correspondent John Ray. John, what has Downing Street been saying about all this morning?
Well, clearly the government is stung by the criticism we heard there from William Hague that somehow ministers have been behind the game from the start with this outbreak. So Tony Blair here today hosting a series of meetings with farmers' leaders, with his agriculture minister and the chief vet, and of course as cabinet as well. And the message that we're getting is really the government is now stepping up the game here, increasing the intensification of the cull, increasing the capacity to dispose of the slaughtered animals. There is some suggestion as well that the Prime Minister may make a quick trip to Cumbria today en route to the Stockholm summit this afternoon. Downing Street been a little bit coy about that, but what we do know for certain is that when he is in Stockholm, Tony Blair will be undertaking what they're calling here a blitz of the European media to emphasise the message that we're trying to get, what they're trying to put out loud and clear, that Britain remains open for business as far as tourism is concerned.
What about this other message about election dates? Did that come up among cabinet ministers this morning?
It is significant that the only mention of the election date at this morning's cabinet was in terms of sending out the message if they were to delay the local elections on May the 3rd, and of course by implication the general election, which we expect for the same day, that would send out the message that Britain is closed for business, that there is a real crisis going on. So I think we can read into that that Tony Blair, despite saying yesterday that he was listening to what people were saying, is still pretty determined to press ahead on the timetable that we know he's laid out for the early part of May.
John Ray in Downing Street, thank you. Well, we go live now to Linda Kennedy, who's in Dumfries, one of the worst affected areas. Linda, what do people there think of these forecasts that the outbreak could go on for months?
I think it's news that they were pretty much dreading, but to hear it confirmed from such an authoritative source is certainly something people didn't want to hear. I mean, not just the farmers, who certainly didn't want to know that the disease was going to be marching inexorably onwards, but from local people. I mean, I've been speaking to mothers who are very concerned about their kids going to school. They're actually deciding to keep them off school because of the constant effect of the cloud of smoke which has been in existence over this part of the country for the past 3 or 4 weeks. And they're sort of saying, well, that's just the short-term effects. If it's going on for months, then they're going to start getting even more worried about the impact on everybody's health here.
The government's now admitted there haven't been enough vets in action. What do the people around there think of the way the outbreak has been handled?
I think in Dumfries and Galloway they certainly share the frustration which exists in other parts of the country which is infected by foot and mouth. And that is, well, why is it just taking so long? Today, for example, the preventative cull here is getting underway after quite a considerable delay. And all of that has been because of the huge logistical planning involved. And there's no criticism of the fact that there's been not enough effort going into that planning, but why are there not more resources going towards it? The question here on everybody's lips, why has it all been taking so long?
Linda Kennedy, thank you very much. An extraordinary spying row has erupted between Russia and America, of a kind not seen since the Cold War. The US has ordered more than 50 Russian diplomats out of the country, accusing them of being spies. Russia says the expulsions are extremely unfriendly and has vowed to retaliate. Here's our diplomatic editor, Robert Moore.
This morning in Moscow, the US ambassador met with senior Russian officials, apparently on a pre-arranged visit. But American diplomats know that Russia will unquestionably respond, although the ambassador pretended it was business as usual.
Coming to talk about bilateral relations.
Can you tell us how many diplomats have been sent home from the United States?
Moscow has described the expulsions of its diplomats as a fallback to the Cold War epoch. And President Putin himself, a former KGB agent, is almost certain to be ordering a reciprocal list of dozens of US spies and diplomats who will also be thrown out. America's expulsion of the Russians follows the discovery that Moscow's intelligence operations have been extraordinarily successful. Last month it was discovered that Robert Hanssen, an FBI veteran, had been betraying some of America's most closely guarded secrets. The new Bush administration claims that Russian spying against the US has reached Cold War levels, and that Moscow espionage operations have to be tackled in a public and dramatic way. As dozens of staff in the Russian embassy in Washington pack their bags, it puts a chill in the air as the new administration seeks to forge a different relationship with Russia, now complicated by a major espionage row. Robert Moore, ITN.
The London stock market is reeling this lunchtime as the main index of 100 leading shares continues to plummet. A short time ago it was more than 159 points down and still falling. It follows a series of profit warnings from British companies, sparking serious concern that economic slowdown in the United States is now spreading to Britain. The Macedonian army has renewed its bombing campaign against ethnic Albanian rebels. 2 civilians are reported to have been killed in the crossfire. Macedonian troops started firing again this morning in spite of the guerrillas' apparent offer of a ceasefire. The army is targeting rebel strongholds in the hills near the border with Kosovo. At least 4 people have been hurt when a cliff collapsed on a hotel in the Isle of Wight. Thousands of tons of mud crashed through the walls of the seaside hotel in Shanklin, seriously damaging cars in the path of the landslide. Guests and nearby residents have been moved into emergency accommodation. The Russian space station Mir has finally begun its fall to Earth. After 15 often troubled years in orbit, it is expected to splash down in the South Pacific tomorrow. Or rather, parts of it are. As Roland Burke explains, getting Mir back into the Earth's atmosphere will be a big challenge.
After 15 years in space and 3 billion miles, Mir's journey is about to come to a fiery end. At mission control outside Moscow, scientists are lining up for the final descent. If all goes to plan, they'll fire Mir's thrusters shortly after midnight, pushing it out of orbit. Most of the space station will burn up in the atmosphere, but up to 30 tons of metal, some in chunks as big as a Mini, will reach the Earth. The Russians hope it will splash down in the remote Pacific, but they've taken out £140 million insurance just in case it hits land.
There is still some risk involved in the operation. It would not be true to say it's perfectly routine and normal. However, our experience working with our Russian colleagues is certainly they are very skillful at this type of manoeuvre.
On one of its last orbits, Mir passed over Fiji, where sightseers, including 4 Russian cosmonauts, are gathering. They should get an excellent view of what's being billed as the greatest fireworks display the world has ever seen. Roland Burke, ITN.
We're taking a break now, but we have more of the day's news still to come, including police exhume James Hanratty's body for DNA tests, and the Britons preparing for an Arctic adventure. All that and news from your region when we come back. Welcome back. Today's main news. The government has warned that the foot and mouth outbreak could last for months to come. This morning, the first cases were confirmed in the Republic of Ireland. And Russia has vowed to retaliate after the United States expelled more than 50 of its diplomats over spying allegations. The remains of James Hanratty, who was hanged for murder nearly 40 years ago, have been exhumed by the police. They want to check his DNA to try to prove that he did commit the notorious A6 murders. His supporters claim he was seen miles away at the time of the killings. Here's Ben McCarthy.
Covered by a large tent, the grave where James Hanratty was buried with his aunt. In the presence of a priest, the sensitive process of exhuming the 2 bodies began at 4 o'clock this morning. Hanratty was 25 when he was sent to the gallows in 1962. He always protested his innocence. He'd been convicted of the infamous murder of scientist Michael Gregston and the rape of Gregston's 22-year-old lover Valerie Story. The pair were abducted at gunpoint and forced to drive from Berkshire to a lay-by on the A6 in Bedfordshire. There, Mr. Gregston was shot and killed. Miss Story was left for dead. James Hanratty claimed to have been in North Wales at the time of the killing. The Criminal Cases Review Commission has referred the matter to the Court of Appeal. It will now look at new scientific evidence, including DNA.
So after almost 40 years of doubt, it's hoped that by exhuming the body of James Hanratty, science will be able to determine conclusively whether or not he did carry out the A6 murder.
Hanratty's brother and mother have already given DNA samples to scientists to compare with those found at the murder scene, and they revealed a match. Police believe the new DNA taken from James Hanratty will prove beyond doubt that he was the killer. James Hanratty's body's now been taken away so the DNA tests can be carried out. It'll be returned to the cemetery for reburial this afternoon. The outcome of the case is not likely to be known until the autumn. Ben McCarthy, ITN.
I'll be back with the main news, plus we have the story of how 2 Britons are planning to cross the icy barrier between Alaska and Russia. Now the latest from ITV newsrooms around the country.
Good afternoon. The Environment Minister Michael Meacher arrived in the West Country this morning to spearhead the government's £10 million campaign aimed at convincing people that the countryside is open for business. Well, a short while ago, our reporter David Woodland spoke to Mr Meacher while he was in Taunton.
Well, I am seeing people are having a problem. That's exactly what I am going on to see. I'm going to Axminster, where I'm actually going to see that the livestock market is closed. I'm seeing the retail market, which is severely down. I'm talking to anyone who wants to come to see me. I'm going to a boatyard at Lyme Regis. I'm going to Bicton Park. I'm meeting a whole range of representatives. I assure you, I don't know whether an election is coming, a general election. We're certainly going ahead with the local elections. This is not about elections. There is a very serious national problem here.
Thousands of lambs are dying on high ground right at this very moment because farmers can't get the licences to move them back to barns on the farms. As Rural Affairs Minister, are you doing anything to help the situation?
Well, we are. That is one of the issues. Obviously, the whole question of burial, the time span from diagnosis to slaughter and from slaughter to burial, all of those issues are being examined. There has been a problem over the availability of vets, of slaughtermen and JCBs. Now, the latter two problems I think MAF have now overcome. There is still a problem about not enough vets. We are increasing the number. I still think more are needed. Yes, there are logistical problems, but we are doing everything possible in a massive organisational system to meet those.
Environment Minister Michael Meacher. The National Trust has announced that it's to reopen dozens of properties which had been closed in the wake of the crisis. They include Stourhead in Wiltshire and Dunster Castle and Gardens in Somerset. The reopenings will be phased in over the next few weeks. The Trust has drawn up a set of strict guidelines for the visitor attraction to prevent the spread of foot and mouth. They include keeping dogs on leads and making sure livestock and visitors are kept well apart. For a full list of National Trust properties being reopened, log on to our website at www.htvwest.com/F&M. Well, doors opened at the new House of Fraser store in Bristol today. The chain is hoping to bring a touch of glamour back into Broadmead following the loss of the previous store.
It was a welcome sight for Broadmead, customers trickling back through the doors of the once fated store. House of Fraser have taken over where Bentall's failed and at the site that John Lewis left behind when it moved to the Mall. The chain hopes to be the saviour of Broadmead, bringing in a touch of class with designer names and products. All of the staff from Bentall's are on board, along with a further 40 new ones. Manager Steve Bluff is convinced that it's going to be a hit with shoppers.
House of Fraser has got a recognised brand name in Bristol. We're confident we can make it work. We will make it work.
When Dingles in Clifton closed more than a year ago, many feared that House of Fraser had left the city for good. But when Bentall's pulled out of Bristol in January, the chain saw it as an opportunity to make a welcome return.
They were at Queen's Road and they always had a good good variation of stock.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's down from Clifton to Broadmead.
I'm hoping to get a cup of free coffee in there.
Well, the doors are open, but only time will tell whether House of Fraser can breathe new life back into this part of Broadmead, or whether the store will go the same way as its predecessor. Myra Lee, HTV News, Bristol.
2 police forces in the region are being given cash by the government to replace their helicopter. Avon and Somerset Police and Gloucestershire Constabulary are among forces throughout the country being given Home Office money towards their helicopter costs. The Environment Agency is today launching its plans to safeguard water supplies for the region in years to come. In the document, the agency looks 25 years ahead and considers environmental, social and economic changes which could affect supplies. It says there's a pressing need for better water efficiency by both domestic and business users. On to sport now, and a Wiltshire man will be attempting to make a big splash at the weekend by being in the team to win the boat race. 21-year-old Ben Birch from Marlborough is part of the Oxford crew, competing in the 147th running of the race with Cambridge on the River Thames this Saturday.
The training's been arduous and sacrifices numerous, but for one of the crews in Saturday's boat race, it will all be worthwhile. The trophy contested by Oxford and Cambridge is a whopper. Just as well then that those battling over 4¼ miles of the Thames are Man Mountains. At 15 stones and 6 foot 6 inches, Marlborough's Ben Birch is among the biggest in the Dark Blues boat. Plenty of room then for some pre-race nerves.
Certainly excited, but nervous as well. Obviously it's a big day, but we're all looking forward to it. We've been waiting for it for 6 months now, so it's a chance to put into practice what we've been training for.
Ben, who began rowing at the age of 13 and will be representing Pembroke College, picked up the trophy last year and is following in his father's footsteps.
My dad rowed for Goldie back in 1970, so I've always always been involved in rowing. And after left school, came to Oxford, that was something I really wanted to do.
And Dad'll be one mighty proud man if Big Ben strikes again with another success this weekend. Richard Payne, HTV News.
A new Macmillan Centre opened at Frenchay Hospital in Bristol today. The £1 million centre will provide treatment for patients suffering from chronic pain, cancer and other illnesses. Public Health Minister Yvette Cooper opened the new centre earlier this morning. It'll provide support and information to patients about their treatment. And on to the weather for the west now. This afternoon we're in for patchy rain and some dry spells. It will be mild though, top temperature 12 Celsius. Tonight will start out dry, but during the early hours showers will move up through the region. It'll also be a mild night with an overnight low of 5 Celsius. Well, have a really good afternoon. We'll be back with an update this afternoon at 3:05. Bob and Sherry will be here with our main programme at 6 with more on the interview with Michael Meacher, which you can also get on HTV's website, and full details of those National Trust properties which are reopening, www.htvwest.com. That's it for now. We'll hand back to the ITV studios with Nicholas Owen.
Hello again. 2 British explorers are attempting to make one of the last unconquered journeys on Earth, crossing the ice packs which stretch from Alaska to Asia. No mean feat, and they intend to do it in a machine which looks like a rather curious road sweeper. Terry Lloyd has been to investigate.
Just below the Arctic Circle in Nome, the last team completes the annual 1,000-mile Alaskan dog sled race. Amongst the well-wishers are 2 strangers in town, British explorers Steve Brooks and Graham Stratford. After witnessing this primitive form of polar travel, the 2 men head off to try out their customised snowmobile, which they hope will set the new Arctic record. For decades, adventurers have attempted to drive across the Bering Strait, the moving ice bridge which joins North America to Asia. Brooks and Stratford believe they've put together the only vehicle that can do it.
Lots of people have got vehicles that can cross the ice, but sooner or later the ice is going to break. And when it does, you've got to first be able to float, second you've got to propel yourself, and thirdly, and the hardest bit, you've got to be able to climb back up onto the ice shelf.
If Snowbird crashes through the ice, which is likely, this large drum will begin turning to try and claw Snowbird back onto the nearest ice ledge. But if the vehicle stays in open water, then 2 huge screws, one either side, will begin spinning to propel the vehicle forward and to act as buoyancy aids.
It's one of the planet's last great challenges to traverse the 56 miles which separate the old world from the new. Terry Lloyd, ATN, Nome, Alaska.
A reminder of the headlines this lunchtime. The government has admitted that the foot and mouth outbreak could go on for months. The Republic of Ireland today confirmed its first cases. Russia's vowed to retaliate after the United States expelled more than 50 of its diplomats on spying allegations. And the main 100 share index in London has plummeted to a 28-month low. A short time ago, it was 164 points down and still falling. That's it from me. Next from ITN, the ITV Evening News starting at 6:30. The lunchtime news, we're back tomorrow at 12:30. Goodbye.
Powergen. Gas, electricity and telephone.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, I'm afraid the outlook over the next few days is a fairly unsettled one. It's a case of fairly cloudy skies and breezy with it as well. Now, during the course of tonight and tomorrow, we're expecting the southern half of the country to catch the worst of that rain, leading in turn to localised flooding. On to the detail for today. Let's follow that band of rain and sleet we saw yesterday. Now in the northern half of the country, sunshine to the north of it, cloudy skies to the south with scattered showers and sunshine for southern counties. High of pleasant 12 or 54 in Fahrenheit, chillier further north. We've still got that band for tonight, some clear slots and frost. Further south, it's cloudy and damp, and the next lot of rain getting into southern counties ready for tomorrow. That's all from me.
Powergen. Gas, electricity and telephone.